name is Andrew Wu, LVMH Greater China Group President. I'm very happy to join Fashion Asia today to talk about fashion influences of Hong Kong over mainland Chinese consumerism. Today, we first want to talk about the influence from Hong Kong in the form of entertainment and fashion. As you know, since 1979, when China opened up for the economic reform, Hong Kong has been a leading influence over Chinese consumers. It's in the form of films, TV dramas, pop music, and tons of celebrities. Today, we are so happy to have Alex and Wesley, both young Hong Kong actors, very prominent ones. And more importantly, you also come from very, very prominent Hong Kong families of celebrities who represent the golden era of Hong Kong entertainment. So welcome both Alex and Wesley, and we are going to be so happy to be joined by you to have this conversation on this topic. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Under the circumstances, we're not physically meeting each other, but today I think the world is so small. We are living in a global village. We are connected by the cloud. We are connected by the internet. I don't feel anything less than face-to-face with you. So again, very happy to have both of you join us for this discussion. First and foremost, I just was wondering, because you were both born in 1980s, right? You were born in 1980s, and that was the time that actually the Hong Kong entertainment influence in China was so strong, so strong. Do you have any memories of when you were small, what it was like for the industry in Hong Kong? What was your memory of that time? 1980s, 1990s, what was it like?
Hi, Andrew. I'm Alex. First of all, I remember, well, first of all, now that I'm older, I feel that I was very, very lucky that we were born in the 80s, because when we came out, Hong Kong, the economy, the entertainment industry, music industry, everything was at its peak. So we got to see Hong Kong at a very, very high point in its, in its arc. But so I remember when I was young, like I would follow my father, who was a very popular singer in the 80s, to concerts at the Coliseum. And like, it was in that generation that they first started doing Cantonese songs at this really big Coliseum, like, at the Hong Kong Coliseum, a very iconic place that wasn't made for concerts. It was made for sports. And they transformed it into this like musical landmark. So I remember going there, even when I was like 3 years old, running around backstage, and they would have like consecutive concerts of like 20 nights in a row. And the people, it would be full every night. And I really remember the energy of the crowd, because they were very enthusiastic, and they were, I think they never saw something in that lifetime too, to witness this. And it was a Hong Kong singer, and it was all, people were very excited to see the music. So when I think of 80s Hong Kong entertainment, that's what I remember. I remember just really hot, hustling, bustling, people going crazy, screaming, and it was very fun, I remember.
It was Cantonese songs, or was it something other than Cantonese? English?
Yeah, that's another really interesting point that you bring out, because if we just talk about music in Hong Kong, actually language was always changing. Like in the 60s and the 70s, all Hong Kong singers sang in English. So nobody sang Cantonese songs. It wasn't until maybe around the late 70s that, a lot of artists in Hong Kong, especially like Sam Hui and even my dad, they started to popularize Cantonese lyrics with Western music sensibilities. And that was when Cantopop really ignited. And everything, because of the economy and the lifestyle here, it really just all became one. So Sam was the first one to do the concert in Hong Kong, and then my dad was the second one.
And the language is interesting, because the lyrics writers probably were born during that time, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. I think you're really insightful because they were starting to write about lifestyle in Hong Kong back in the 70s. So they would, especially like Sam's lyrics, you talk about chasing girls, making money, being a hardworking man.
Mahjong, or
Yeah,
these kind of things.
so it was really, really specific to the lifestyle that was happening in Hong Kong then. And I think that's a really important point when a city's lifestyle starts to become very popular, then you can have a lot of different branches of really highly successful art and fashion.
Was it, I'm just curious, was the pop music the same time as TV drama, Hong Kong TV drama, the same time, or it was the same combination, the same combination of the same verse? TV drama, was it sometime also around that the Hong Kong TV drama became popular?
I think about, so yeah, well, because my parents weren't in music like Alex's parents were. They were in acting, so they all both came from TVB, and then my dad branched out and went more into movies as well. And it was about the 70s, 80s as well too, and they were more involved in acting by then.
So in a way, we talked about lyrics, we talked about TV drama. Actually, that was Chinese language. So therefore, that was probably the movement to really start to connect with Chinese people. When you think about it, probably this is probably very important. But at that time, Hong Kong was such a sort of the top of the regional entertainment industry. In your childhood, were you traveling? Were you just in Hong Kong, or you remember you started to travel to other places?
Well, when I grew up in Hong Kong, so I went to school in Hong Kong. But then every summer, my family would try and go on vacation around Southeast Asia to like mostly we chose like beach areas. So it was like Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, and occasionally I remember when I was young, I went to China as well. Went to Beijing, went to the Great Wall.
But did you start to feel that your parents' celebrity status already were influencing the places you were traveling to? Were they already like, followed by fans where you were going?
Oh, definitely.
Already?
Right? Yeah, definitely they got.
Well, I went to, when I was very young, I went to school in California. I moved there when I was 4. So I did my education there. And I remember the kids that I grew up with, they, like, when they asked me what my dad did, I would tell them, oh, he's a singer. And then they're like, really? And then like, maybe there was some pictures I'd show them like, on a stage or something. But I didn't really start to feel the influence of Hong Kong music and entertainment and fashion in my lives abroad until maybe I remember exactly when. I was probably in around 1994 or 5 when Hong Kong made a movie. Yes, in the mid-90s, when Hong Kong made the movie called Gu Wak Zai, Young and Dangerous. And then I remember I first learned about this movie through one of my English friends in England. And he was like, you gotta see this movie. I was like, really? He was like, yeah, this movie is about gangsters in Hong Kong. I was like, really? And that I felt like that took the world, the international world, it had a big impact on film and fashion and lifestyle. And that was the first time I felt Hong Kong entertainment really started to come into my life through friends or word of mouth.
It's really interesting to talk two of you to see Hong Kong in the 80s and 90s from your eyes. But I'm also curious, being where you are today, and you think back and look back, where do you think Hong Kong got its influence from first, before it had Cantonese lyrics and all that? So Hong Kong certainly translated something that was not Chinese into Cantonese and connecting with the local consumer. Where did the first influence, you think, most importantly contributed to this movement that became a a very influential part in the 80s and 90s. Where did the influence come from? In your eye now, when you look at it, you go back and look at it and you see, this is from where maybe? Because you are so international.
Well, I think like music-wise, if we talk very specific, like it was, you know, in the 70s when all these singers started to write their own Cantonese lyrics, they had already been singing English songs, like, you know, pop songs, folk songs for many, many years. So actually all the older singers in Hong Kong, like Sam, my dad, Alan Tam, Teresa Carpio, they can all sing English songs like you know, nothing, because they've mastered both crafts, and somehow they were able to take a little bit of the Western sensibilities and then also the Hong Kong lifestyle, and they made something else, and they took the best of both worlds, and they kind of made another hybrid. Yes. So they really pioneered a different genre, and it was very new and very unique, and belonged to, you know, the Hong Kong market. And I think for music, that was a big influence of a lot of different influences, and also like I remember like back then, like music labels from abroad, they would come and set up in Hong Kong, like, you know, Universal, Sony, EMI, and all those people. They came here and they brought along that whole business strategy as well. So it was a melting pot of different of business philosophies.
So it's Western music, Japanese music, even songs that earlier Cantonese songs, many of them were cover songs, right? Because the music may be originally from somewhere else. The lyrics were local, local language. Yes.
So Andrew, did you hear those songs when you were growing up? Or
yes, because certainly I have to say I owe myself to the Hong Kong influence back then, because Hong Kong, as I said, I think me representing mainland Chinese background people, and I think Hong Kong was such an important influence in the 80s, 90s, and 2000, maybe early 2000, in a strong way. We can talk about it later, but certainly there's no denial about the extraordinary influence, because in the 80s, you know, China coming out of the Cultural Revolution had little or zero exposure to the West. So it was really an educational experience for everything. Hong Kong movies, and there are tons of them, influencing people about how to do their hair or wearing their sunglasses, and copying maybe without knowing the labels of the products, but they are copying the style, right? Certainly, I think the first influence was through movies. It was not so much television. And then, of course, television come, but I think in between movies and television, it was indeed the pop music, because all the pop music stars certainly influenced, and people were copying or trying to be. For music, of course, it was after maybe your parents sort of that wave. There was a wave of 4 Heavenly Kings, and the first pop, I think in the 90s, even in the late 90s, early 2000, even during that period, a lot of Chinese pop stars were trying to be, trying to be Li Ming, trying to be Wang Fei, trying to be Liu Dehua. So I think there's that period, at least I think lasting until I would say 2010, probably, up until then. So it was probably the first 30 years of China's, open door development that was copying, admiring, copying, trying to be, and embracing. So I think the influence is extraordinary. And we're talking about entertainment, but of course it comes into all fashions, right? All kinds of fashions. How people have their hair done, how, people actually copied the looks of, Hong Kong movie stars, your dad and your mom. I think, they have extraordinary lasting influence, I'm pretty sure. So no doubt, I think it's not just one generation. I think it's a succession of, 30 years is a long time, by the way. And today, I think, I would say people around 30, maybe not the very young ones, around 30 would still have very, very deep impressions, that have, come from, the decades of what you just mentioned. Probably, they were the ones who were chasing after all the celebrities and as in making your life difficult, maybe as well. So yes, I think it's a very important one. Yes, but I'm sure what I'm telling you, you more or less feel, right? You feel this as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just very curious. When you were young, you started to probably get into contact with mainland Chinese, which have been changing so much, right? When was the first time, either of you or both of you, when did you first visit China? Which year? Do you remember?
My first time visiting China was probably Guangzhou in 1992, I want to say, because I remember I was around 7 years old. And I think I followed my dad. He had a concert there, and I went with him. And that was my first time visiting China.
Did you get a shock? Did you get a shock? Did you go there and feel, wow, this is what I want to go home now?
Well, I mean, it was definitely very different from Hong Kong and from.
Which hotel did you go? Did you go and stay?
I don't remember, but I remember we stayed at a hotel, and we had a roof. Like there was a top floor suite, penthouse suite. The hotel was beautiful. I remember this like very clearly. It was a top penthouse suite, and there was like a pool in the middle, and it was very, very grand. And there's no but everything else wasn't as developed. So when we would leave the hotel and go to the he was probably singing in a stadium, like a sports stadium. So that was very different. It was a big contrast between the hotel and everything else.
And people in the streets probably will make you feel you are in a different place.
A lot. Yes. I remember a lot of people on the streets. There was a lot of traffic, and then and I remember, but that was about it. Yeah, that was my first impression.
How about you?
I think I was about the same age as well. Probably 92, 93, when I was 5 or 6 years old. I visited Beijing. It was just for sightseeing.
You went further. You went much further.
Much further. So we just went to the Great Wall, Forbidden City, just regular tourist things that we did. But I didn't really remember much about what people were wearing, or maybe Andrew can tell us more about that.
Or Andrew, do you? What was the first time you remember coming to Hong Kong, and was that a big
first time? Because I was in
experience?
Canada first. I went to Canada first, and then came back. And first time I went to Hong Kong was actually in probably mid 1980s, and I felt Hong Kong, because obviously I never visited. I felt Hong Kong like the air was so thick. And I felt that people were describing it, this is a city that you can smell money in the air. I didn't smell money, but I certainly smell the air. It's certainly the intensity, the energy. I'm not talking about anything that probably people may think about, but I think it's unprecedented. I never felt there was a city on earth that has so much energy in the air, because obviously coming from North America back to Asia, you have a jet lag and all that. But this is a city that did not sleep. Obviously, when you land, it was late, but at night, you know, tons of people, lights and everything. That was the time that China was still very, very dark, almost completely dark, right? Because it was the mid 80s. Hong Kong really stood out. Is the city of lights, energy, totally no sleep, but people just working everywhere. So the energy, it was probably the most impressive. Of course, other people may see money and everything, but that was not into that as much. But certainly, it's a place that I felt that was really because I obviously saw a lot of movies already and know a lot of people from Hong Kong. So I think it was incredible. Obviously, all the tall buildings and all that. But this is the interesting part. I think this is probably during the time when you were born. But when you started to go visit China, that was a China probably, I would say, in my sort of reflection, that was about to take off, but not yet. About. Because in the 80s, it was still sleeping. In the 90s, it started to take off, about to take off. So your impression of Guangzhou or Beijing then, whether the lack of it was very true, because nothing to impress you actually at that time. It was
I think for me and Wes, like we saw in our lifetime, in a span of 10 to 15 years, China becoming actually very similar to Hong Kong. Like I remember even the first time I went to Shanghai, when I came back here to Hong Kong to work, which was about maybe years ago. I went when I was younger, but the first time I went 10 years ago, and I was, really amazed to see how many buildings have the same name as buildings at Hong Kong, and how Shanghai transformed itself into probably a very similar 80s Hong Kong, a city that doesn't sleep, and that happened right before our eyes. And I think that was
I had to mention something. I had to mention something before I forget. During the 80s and at least up until mid 1990s, China, you went to Guangzhou, you went to Beijing for the first visit, but China, most people don't speak Cantonese, right? Most people. But in the 80s and early 90s, 1 billion people were all trying to sing Cantonese songs without being able to speak Cantonese. You can see how popular, and they actually sing really well without knowing how to speak the language. So it's incredible. The influence is incredible, right? So I don't know, when did you start to learn Mandarin? Maybe you felt that you wanted to learn Mandarin. Did you learn? You obviously. Yeah,
I did because I studied acting in Beijing. So that's when I first seriously studied the language, around 2010, 2011.
Yes. But you imagine for decades people couldn't speak Cantonese, but they were singing Cantonese songs.
That's interesting.
Yes. I think that's testament to show how influential the Hong Kong entertainment was.
Yes.
And I think now people are trying to learn Korean songs,
exactly. Like, you see the importance of entertainment. It's not something that is imagined. It's something that is really real. I think you guys have big responsibilities. You think about this. Yes. We talked about the influence of fashion, Hong Kong's influence. Do you feel the differences are narrowing in the sense that, do you feel that you are bringing an influence now for fashion? Do you?
I think it's very challenging nowadays to be to bring a certain fashion and to be a spokesperson or an influencer, because everything is very fast now. And when I was younger, my main fashion influence was probably really closely linked with my lifestyle, which was I was really into skateboarding. And because I liked skateboarding, that means I listened to hip hop music. But so it was when I was growing up, a lot of different fashion was related to your lifestyle. So maybe skateboarding people would be like this. And then you had people who were into rock music and they would have a different style of dress. And then you had maybe, a different style, maybe a sporty person would have his line of clothing. But now maybe because of social media and everything's kind of mixed together, there are less distinctions, and everybody's kind of like one thing.
Yes.
So now it's hard to be very individualistic. I feel everything is kind of competing to
Wesley and you, Alex, both you studied in the US, right? Do you feel that your experience in the US have shaped your sense of fashion?
Definitely. For me, yes. Because for myself, growing up in Hong Kong, going to an international school, when I was in high school, I didn't know much about fashion itself, but it was more like, oh, what my friends, what my classmates were wearing. And back then we were all into basketball, hip hop as well, listening to like Western music. So we were dressing like oversized t-shirts, very baggy jeans, maybe wearing it very low, showing parts of boxers, that kind of style. But then going to the US, I realized more of my classmates in the States, in LA especially, they were really dressing very casually, just whatever was comfortable. Some people even wore their pajamas to class, and it was fine. So that gave me the impression that, oh, maybe I should wear whatever's comfortable to me, not just following blindly what people were wearing on magazine covers or what my idols were wearing. I had to like gauge, is that comfortable for me? Do I feel comfortable? Do I have the confidence wearing that when I go out? Yeah, that shaped me a lot.
Oh, Andrew, I remember when I was 3 or 4, so I moved to America, California to study. And then back when I was 4 or 5 years old, I didn't choose what I wore myself. So my mom chose my outfits, but she dressed me in a very Hong Kong style clothes. So like she would put like, I would have probably like shorts and like some designer like graphic socks and some like little loafer shoes and a polo shirt. And when I went to school, everyone made fun of me because I was very like Hong Kong. Or when you're over there, people say you're fresh off the boat. You're not from America. So after a couple times of going to school dressed like that, I went home and I told my mom, like, no, what are you doing? Don't dress me up in these nice clothes. Because I think in Hong Kong, people's fashion sense is a little bit more maybe associated with a brand or a price, but kind of like what Wes said, like the fashion in the States and America is really like, they shy away from that. It's more about functionality. It's about lifestyle. It's about, if you really go to school in your pajamas, that's really your pajamas. So I had to go through this little transition of getting away from the Hong Kong fashion.
That's very interesting, because this influence is actually effectively influencing the whole international fashion industry. So what you're describing is not something just is happening to maybe the Hong Kong sense of fashion. It's actually influencing, if we look closely, look at all the current trends, the streetwear, the athletic wear, the leisure wear, the whole trend is actually being affected by, what you just described, right? Yeah. You are a reflection of what's going on. So your experience is fascinating because it tells us something beyond your personal experience. Fascinating indeed. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
and especially nowadays, because when we were growing up, I think like what Wesley said, hip hop, basketball, skateboarding, those when we were growing up, those were very niche and very underground and kind of not looked upon very highly. But also in our lifetime, we've seen, big brands adopt these kind of fashion sensibilities into their whole branding.
Yes.
They've adopted, like streetwear, like what you said, like, athletic clothing, sneakers. So I think that's what we grew up, when we were growing up, those things have become like the mainstream now.
Yes. I think what also, make us realize maybe another thing, that there was a time, there was a very closed China. There was a bridge that bridges China to the outside world. But fast forward, as you describe, you were in the States, you see this influence from the States. We also probably need to be reminded when you think about the French labels, the Italian labels, the whatever, guess what? The designers are not French. The designers are not Italian. Designers are not necessarily, from where the label comes from. So even when you think about the fashion, it's no longer with a strong nationalistic sort of, a definition. So in a way, it almost, what you just described is confirming fashion is getting literally internationalized with no borders, literally, right? So it's really fusing everything together, which brings me to another question, because there was a time we could describe it as Hong Kong entertainment, Hong Kong influence, Hong Kong this or that. But today, with your generation, do you think Hong Kong still has an advantage in terms of international exposure for fashion?
I think it still has its advantage because looking at history, like Hong Kong, the film or TV, it was known as the Eastern Hollywood. Like it was just, people would see it as, okay, there's Hollywood in the West, but in Asia, there's Hong Kong movies and Hong Kong television where it influenced, like you said, a whole bunch of people around Asia or the Asian community around the world. So back then we didn't have the internet or anything else. So people would see movies, watch TV, look at fashion magazines to get their influences, their idols, and then copy them. But then nowadays, it's definitely changed with the internet and the ease of everything so convenient where you open your phone or laptop and see so much news. You can see so much information about literally anything, let alone just fashion. And so if we're talking about China or just Asia, like Hong Kong still has its influences because of what people have been used to be doing. They would look at, okay, what are the Hong Kong celebrities, icons are wearing nowadays? What's the hit? What's in nowadays? Like, oh, what's Alex wearing nowadays? How does he dress? Oh, his hairstyle's good. Let me try that out. But then definitely in China, they have their own icons, their own idols nowadays where they can look up onto. But I think Hong Kong still has its own edge.
Alex?
Let's see. So the question is, do I feel that Hong Kong still has an advantage? Mm-hmm. I think Hong Kong creators or fashion influencers or these kind of people, we're kind of stuck in the middle right now. We need to figure out like how to further, like just speaking for me, on my behalf, like how can I, because like you were, Andrew, you were saying everything's more connected, big international brands have people, designers from different countries. It seems more and more that everyone is on a more international level of collaboration. And maybe Hong Kong in the past 20 years, they've fell a little bit behind. And right now we're also stuck in the middle between playing with international brands and also at the same time we have a choice to cooperate with China and China industry and China fashion, and they're very different. So yes. Like I think nowadays we might have to collaborate and make more collaborations. But I'm very optimistic because all our background, with our previous industry, we have a very solid foundation. Like language-wise, Hong Kong people can speak English, they can speak Mandarin, and now, and especially in the past couple of years, like Wes, like he's already gone to Hollywood, and seems like yes. America is a little bit more welcoming for Asian artists.
Yes. Yes.
And somehow, like I think Hong Kong people have an advantage, and we can go both ways. And yes. I think we just need to wait for the right opportunity, maybe, and but still keep working very hard.
Yes.
And,
very good point. I think it's all about fusion. So I think fusion requires probably taking, a lot of things and mix together. And in that sense, coming back to the point of entertainment, because we're talking about fashion and it's about the entertainment industry. Is this entertainment industry a reflection, you think, of fashion? Or is it a driver of fashion, meaning that maybe whatever that is fashionable, it could be driven to be bigger by entertainment, or in fact, it could create fashion? What do you think? Maybe you have your views.
Yeah, I think they are definitely interlinked. Entertainment and fashion and culture, and the possibility. Like, I remember I read an article recently about crime in Hong Kong. So crime in Hong Kong in the 80s was rampant. Like, you would hear regularly on the news, people would like robbers with guns and hammers, they would go into a jewelry store and steal everything and have this kind of crime. So therefore, that kind of lifestyle seeped into the movie language. So back then, there were tons of movies about criminals with masks and guns and everything, and therefore you could have the heroic hero come and catch these people. But nowadays, it's these kind of juicy material isn't as prevalent in Hong Kong. It's maybe because it's related to the economy, but so Hong Kong's kind of in a more mellow phase than before. Whereas opposed to countries like America or even China now, I think there's a lot more inspiration. I'm not saying it's related to crime, but there's a lot more cultural happenings. And I think Hong Kong right now, I know tons of very talented creators, musics, artists, but right now we haven't really quite found a good material to tell a really good story.
But I'm a believer in entertainment as a fashion influence. And I think we need a lot more of you, young entertainment celebrities that are in Hong Kong. And I think wave after wave, right? You need to push, more and more waves of this sort of exciting entertainment to probably enhance this topic, what we were talking about, enhance the influential part of a very, very important city like Hong Kong.
Can you share with us how you feel after this virus period, fashion might be affected? Is there going to be a big change in people, how they use fashion or consume fashion?
I think it's a very good question. First of all, I think whatever that was happening before the crisis, we feel accelerates the trends, not creating them, but accelerating them. So it was younger generation of consumers in the marketplace. Now we see the younger generation of consumers coming back even stronger. I think the crisis, to me, it's too early to predict the long-term sort of implications, but it's very clear the crisis have taught people how to respect the environment, the nature, human versus nature, right? Because a little virus like this could send the whole world, onto the floor, So we are humbled. I think human beings are humbled by this little virus. So I think the human respect for nature, for environmental protection, for all things that we hold very dear, family, friends, all this. It's not just for fast tracking everything, right? We need to really balance. I think this balance is important. In many of our brands in our group, we're also looking at a lot of things. There's a lot of very moving things. People will, appreciate things and focus on things that used to be very small and relatively unimportant. But it is important for us. It is important for us for the generations to come, because each generation is responsible for the next one and the next one and the next one, right? We only have one global village, one Earth. And of course,
Yes.
each of us only live a limited number of years. However, long-lived we are not going to be here forever, but, life needs to go on. So that's my answer to you. In conclusion, I think I want to say something about entertainment, Hong Kong influence. Somebody said a few times in the recent past about it's impossible for anyone to step into the same river twice. You've heard of that, right? One cannot step into the same river twice because the water moves. So you think you're stepping into the same river, but it's not the same because the water is running away. I'm thinking about Hong Kong's influence. Hong Kong is a great city, has played such an important role in influencing fashion, lifestyle in the past 40 some years for such a big market like China, Chinese consumerism. Is it the same now? No. Could you go back to the same river? No, the river is running. But still, Hong Kong has a role to play. And you guys have huge responsibilities being Hong Kong actors for the industry of Hong Kong. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.